Good evening, everyone. How you doing?
Great.
All right, I'll take that. I mean, I'm hoping it's going to get a little louder when I introduce the team here. My name's Perry Nemiroff. I work at Collider, and I'm so excited to be here tonight moderating this conversation about Mufasa for all of you. Please join me in welcoming lots of the team behind the movie, beginning with our animation supervisor, Dan Fotheringham. Congrats on the movie, Dan. We also have visual effects supervisor, Adam Valdez. Congratulations. Please welcome cinematographer, James Laxton. Congrats. And finally, we have director, Barry Jenkins. Yet another big congrats to you all on this feat. So Barry, I'm gonna come your way first so we could talk a little bit about signing on to direct this film. When this opportunity first comes your way, especially given it's a very different type of film for you, what is something about it that makes you think, I have something to gain from this as a director who is always evolving my craft?
That's an interesting way of putting the question. When I read the script, I hadn't seen the 2019 film. We had been making the Underground Railroad through the bulk of 2019 and into 2020. It's a thank you, that one person. It was a very, very intense process, like very intense. The world just disappeared for the time we were making it, so I had no idea the movie had even come out. And when I read the script, I saw so many wonderful things that Jeff Nathanson had done with these characters, Jeff Nathanson, the screenwriter. And then I watched the 2019 film and I thought, this is a strange technology. It's just a strange way to make a film. And it couldn't be more different than the thing James and I had just finished doing for 112 days at that point. And I don't know, something about it, I just thought, I think we can chase this. And I will say, I'm glad James is here, because he was the first person I called. I was like, am I fucking crazy? Or is there something interesting in this that we can chase? And he said, I said, yeah. and that really was how we ended up making the film.
You always have to feel a little crazy. If you don't, is it worth it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And this did remind me, because the technology's so new, and these guys have done it more than anyone else. These guys also worked on, I know Adam worked on The Jungle Book and won an Oscar for The Jungle Book.
Why, yes, that's true.
Yeah, an Academy Award for visual effects for The Jungle Book. So, but for us, it was like, well, for me at least, it was like going back to film school. I didn't know you needed light to expose film when I first got to Florida State, and I had to learn that in order to learn how to make movies. And this was also learning how to expose an image with a completely different new technology.
Apparently you don't need light.
You need virtual light.
Before we start to dig into some of the specifics with the visuals, I did want to ask you one story question as well, because you just brought up Jeff, who wrote the screenplay here. So you have his screenplay. His screenplay is essentially based on iconic source material. When you get that screenplay and also kind of view, I guess I would say, Lion King lore, what is space you find within those two things that you thought maybe you could fill in your own unique way as a filmmaker and storyteller?
I wasn't looking for space between the two things. I wasn't as well versed on Lion King lore as he clearly had become while making, because Jeff also wrote the 2019 film, the remake that he and Jon Favreau did. What I did see was my memory of whoever Mufasa and Scar are, and them being frozen in time at that point for 25 years, and that scene where they run off towards the sunset. You guys just saw the movie where they're leaving Taka's kingdom and they're running off towards the sunset. I got to that scene and I was like, holy shit, this is really interesting. Because I think I know exactly who these people are, but I realize I'm actually about to find out who they truly are. And again, I thought there's something for us to chase with the way we see images with this technology, and that really was it.
So James, I want to come your way now to start by talking a little bit about your ongoing collaboration with Barry. And I love the fact that this movie is essentially about found family, and I know you two have met many, many years ago, and now I believe this is the fourth feature film collaboration between the two of you. So two questions that kind of fall under this subject here. What is something about Barry as a leader on set and also a creative partner for you that keeps you coming back for more?
Yeah, I mean, this could be a 2-hour conversation, but I'll try to be brief. Barry is someone who is my favorite kind of collaborator, someone who will listen to you, want ideas from you, push back at you with different versions of an idea, coming together, finding that sort of intertwining between perspectives to find a new version of a language. And, when I look back at our films from the past, inclusive of this one, I find them to be very unique unto themselves. And I feel like it's amazing to have this collaboration because not only do I feel like it's someone that, I feel trusted by, and that goes both ways, but someone who I feel like I'm making new versions of cinematography every time I collaborate. So I don't feel like, I know, for example, when I watch this film, I see ourselves in it, but it's a new version of ourselves. And I felt that way on Underground Railroad, and I felt that way on Moonlight, and I felt that way on Beale Street. And that engagement in finding new ways to be expressive is something I really love about working with Barry.
It's a beautiful way to put it. I feel like this particular question could have hours and hours of answer to it, but what is something about your collaboration that has stayed the same from film to film to film, and what is something about your collaboration on Mufasa that called for something unique?
Yeah, I think if anyone knows our films, like the first word that comes to my mind is intimacy. And I think I see that in the images we're creating here. This is about familial love, romantic love, brotherly love, and when I have those feelings and emotions and I want to try to find a way to put them on screen, intimacy is a word that's always on top of my mind anyway. And so, I see that here. In this film, it might have taken on in different ways than in previous versions of our collaboration. Applicably in some virtual way, obviously. But yeah, intimacy is the thing that I think is the connection point.
Oh, you feel that big time. Adam and Dan, I'm going to come your way now to go back to the idea that you both worked on the 2019 Lion King movie. I'll actually phrase this question somewhat similarly. What is something about having worked on that made a part of the process kind of seamless for you on Mufasa, but then also what is a one-of-a-kind challenge that you encountered when making this movie next?
I guess the similarities are simply that it's a fully animated movie both times. But so we've been through the steps, but I think this time we wanted to really, these two over here have worked together so much as just got to hear about, and we were the new kids on the block into this gang, and when we first all started talking to each other, it seemed like the trick was going to be, how do we take this incredibly long, cumbersome, difficult process and carve out some space for discovery, because the way that they work is to get work up on its feet and really react, especially on their shooting days. And that's hard. We can't give it to them. But what could we give them? And so it was a series of, how could we scout sets together? How could we find places to work? How could we create scenes and then let them react to what was evolving? Now, midway through, James said, I think we're going to get more out of Barry in some scenes if we actually let him direct performers instead of just direct me as a camera after animators have animated something to shoot. And that might be a good handoff to you.
Yeah.
Talk about what we did for that.
Yeah, so essentially trying to get performances, readable performances quickly in animation is really, really hard. Animation is slow, really, really, really slow. And trying to basically give that organic approach that James and Barry really need, I can obviously do really well with, was kind of really tricky for us to give. So we basically attempted to do a bit of motion capture, which is mainly for blocking, and just trying to basically get Barry particularly to direct us on stage. So we ended up spending a couple of months really, on stage and blocking out these performances. And I think that gave, I think particularly James as well, is that in character animation, when you're blocking things out, you literally will just chess piece things across, the ground. Started out, okay, cool, it's going to go from A to B. Okay, what does it look like? And then the response will be like, it looks like a character sliding across the ground. It doesn't look like it's going to be, interesting. It doesn't look like it's stalking, it's upset or anything like that. But just little subtle human emotions or active emotions give you that. And so that's what motion capture gave us. So when the character sort of aggressively came towards something, towards another character, James could respond to that information. And even though it was kind of the basic form of what we were going to do later down the track, years later, it gave something for James to react to. So that was one of the biggest things.
This is the quad capping process, right? Can you explain a little bit about what makes this quad capping different from other performance capture we've seen in the past? And also, I had heard a lot about the fact that the only reason you were able to do that is because certain technology evolved at like the pitch perfect moment that you were able to utilize it when you needed.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few kind of brains going on at that time. Like, I'm obsessive about lions and quadrupeds basically, and so like I really wanted to get into it, but then we had this technology basically with the Unreal Engine that basically meant everything can happen in real time. So you motion capture things and you can see it in real time. So so Barry and James could see it on the screens and stage. But the problem was how to translate that in real time to look like a lion. And that was the sort of technology that we sort of had to develop. And it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag. And if you can imagine a character of like a person that wears a suit where they have all the drums, they kick the thing, I can't remember what they're called, but one-man band, that's it. Yeah. And so that's kind of what we set up in the virtual world. So like the front legs would drive the back legs, and we had a towing system that would move the back end along, and things like that. But basically it's just trying to get to a point where it doesn't look like a goofy Halloween costume, playing out in the virtual world. It actually looked like something you could interact with and look at. So that's kind of where we got to.
It's so funny to watch the faces. People are like, huh? What the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to see it to believe it. But yeah, you can imagine just motion capture translates onto humans really well, not so much into quadrupeds.
It was really impressive and really helpful. So big thank you to you too.
This is an incredible process. I'll back up a little and kind of lean into what it might take to get folks who are not used to this process of filmmaking up to speed. Because I was reading a little bit about a test sequence you all did. I think it was like late 2020, early 2021. I guess the way I'll phrase it differently for both of you. Adam and Dan, when you do something like that with filmmakers who are not used to working this way, what are some of like your top priority pointers and ideas you want to get across in that process? And then for the two of you, what would you say is the biggest learning curve you experienced while doing that test sequence?
Well, maybe the thing to point out is we were in pandemic still. So I was still in London watching these guys do the first test shoot on video camera. I was actually looking at a screenshot I have of it on my laptop on the way over here on the plane. Just seeing like the first time I think Dan and you two were meeting on this stage after we had scouted the set and designed the scene. So it was a very, it was like the first tentative steps. And I think for these two guys, they'll speak to it, but largely it was like, let's just walk through it so you can see what it's like to scout it, to shoot it, and then watch the months go by as we try to make it look like the final thing, and so that we could walk through the whole process one time. And I think that served us pretty well, just like give everybody a basic grounding with each other.
Test shoot sucked. It was just, there's no way we can make a movie this way. But Adam's right, it showed us the basic steps of how to make the movie a way. And as Dan already said, they then began trying to figure out, well, how can we evolve the technology? I loved going back through all the call sheets to figure out, oh, there was a test shoot, and then we demoed what James and Fathers and Ryan Champney evolved to be like, okay, this is how we're going to actually make the movie, and then we evolved that again to get to the quad capping. Am I right remembering?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think for me, like a musician maybe is the best analogy I can think of. You know, it's a new instrument that I had no idea what to do with before it was given to me in my hands. And, but just like probably, I'm not a musician, but I can assume musicians work this way in that like you figure it out. And you know, people like Dan and Adam, you know, held our hands and were gentle with us through the process to make sure that we wouldn't get too frustrated. But ultimately, it was like learning a new instrument, and once you figure out your chord progressions and how those things come together, it actually becomes just like anything else. You just muscle memory, and you start to adapt the thing that's in your brain and find a way to push it through this new box.
I feel like that process needs to stink, so that when you get to the meat of it, it's a little smoother, and you got the pieces that work for you better.
Yeah, I think what it really comes down to is I don't take any joy, and I think I don't work very well if I have to, if the things in my head are exactly what we make. And I think there's a version of making films with this technology where, because you have total control, every blade of grass, every follicle of hair, you can dictate it needs to be there, moving this way at this moment, and the camera's right here, and it moves to there. But it's just not, I don't think you're gonna get anything that has a texture or any kind of spiritual essence by working that way. And so we did have to figure out how can we create just enough of it, as Adam was saying before, set it in motion, and then rather than creating images, capture images. And that was really where the process was. And I think, well, no, I won't say that. I think that's where the process was. Not 100% of the film was done that way, but I think some of the strongest bits.
But some of the test shots are in this movie.
I know.
And that's what's crazy is like we started with that one scene and we shot that scene out, and there was a few that you guys still stuck with. You still felt like, yeah, we got something there. That maybe we're not going to do better than that. And then maybe our job the whole time was when he's talking about capturing the essence of something. Our job was to, and James can attest to this, because James would be sitting with his iPad in reviews going like, wait, take that shot back, let me see it again. He's looking at your original take. He's looking at his take. He's like, we lost something. And so there's so many steps that it's really easy to just lose. You saw some of the credit rolling, and after the four of us, there's 800 other people like touching this movie, and you're just constantly trying to keep them. And Joy, our editor, who's not here, is making. You enjoy making a frame by frame. When do I cut in? When do I cut out? And it might be from something from the shoot, and suddenly that thing's disappeared. That blade of grass isn't there anymore. And you're like, what happened? The cut doesn't feel the same. And you got to go back and find it and put it back in. I mean, these filmmakers took that virtual production capturing process so to heart. And we said, the more you take it to heart, the more we'll try to stick to it. And they really did. And more than probably any other filmmakers we've seen do this kind of process. And I think that's when I watch it and I see stuff. I mean, we know every shot now by heart, right? 4 years later. And I can just sort of feel you carrying the camera. I can feel all the choices in there.
I'll follow up on a whole bunch of that, actually. I'll go back to you very briefly, because you were just emphasizing the fact that you don't like it to play out exactly as you've envisioned. And I know in general you kind of like to explore on set and find new opportunities to include things that you hadn't planned for. In this particular case, I was reading a little bit about your exploration of these virtual sets, and that you would go to places that were obviously designed but weren't necessarily intended to be seen in the finished film. Is there any particular example you remember of something you discovered and now people could see it?
Oh yeah, the whole underwater fight with Kiros and Mufasa at the end. Right after Moonlight won Best Picture, which is a thing that happened. The story is, I went to Merida, Mexico, because I'd seen it on House Hunters International, and I thought, I'm gonna want to get out of town when this thing happens, whether we win or lose. And when I was in Merida, which I flew to Miami first, my hometown, and then 2 hours later, I was in Merida, Mexico. And then 45 minutes by car, I was standing at pyramids. And I was like, holy shit, this is at a time when, this place is being referred to as people from SH exclamation point T whole countries. I hear kids in the audience, I'm gonna put it that way. And yet these people built pyramids 2 hours flight from my project. And they originated the only written language to ever originate in the Americas. Like, wow. And they had all these freshwater swimming holes called cenotes. And so when I came onto the project, I said to Mark Freeberg, our production designer, there's gotta be a cenote in this cave where Rafiki's telling the story. And once he did it, Adam's right, we were scouting, and everybody's walking around the cave, oh, Timon Pumbaa be here. I'm like, I'm like 800 feet underneath the cave, and I'm in the water like, Jay, check this out, this is so cool. Wouldn't it be dope if they just, I looked up and the light was shining in, because when you build these virtual sets, it is, you put on the goggles, and it really is like you're flying around the world, but we're all in our bedrooms, and I looked up and I saw the light, and I thought, oh, this would be just so stunning. And that's how the whole thing with Kiros and Mufasa falling through the floor and having the fight, that's how that came about.
And every time we scouted that set, we're like, where's Barry? We're like, oh, he's down there again.
I wanted to see it.
I don't blame you. So the other thing that had come to mind during those answers before was I read that you heavily embraced imperfections on this movie, and I love that touch, and I definitely see it in the finished film. Can you maybe give us some examples of things that maybe someone would have deemed imperfect, but that imperfection well suited the film and the vibe you wanted it to have?
I think you want to, because I got one in my head, but you.
The one that comes to my mind right now is Mufasa sort of sensing in his sort of third eye of all the gazelles or whatever. What was the line? The gazelles are in the distance and the camera's.
Well, he says antelope.
Yeah, that's right.
You know they're not gazelles.
Yeah, that's right. Just that sort of handheld feeling, and the camera's loose and it's searching for Mufasa's ears, and the follicles coming out of his ears and finding its way to his eye, and just kind of tapping into that. And clearly it's a wandering moment, but it sort of does feel right. It feels authentic, and to me, anyway, I'll put it that way. It feels real. It feels genuine, and I feel connected to the character in that moment because of that sort of inconsistency of camera movement.
Do you want to add an example?
The shot of Taka's face at the end of his transformation with Kiros, we just put the camera a really wide lens, like right in his face, and we're zooming in, and his eyes are flickering. They could have maybe done a more perfect version of that moment of the model's face, but we put an exaggerated lens, which could cause more work for these guys, but they just sort of let it roll. The biggest one is at the end of the race, when the two cubs come out of the water. There's this shot where they're running, we're pulling Taka, and Mufasa's catching up, and he splashes through this puddle, and it's reflecting the light of the sun, and the camera's really shaky because we're on a big lens, and then he catches up, and we're sort of just at this parallax, and it's a broken shot, and it was broken in VCam, and they perfected it, and we sent it back, it's like, no, don't fix it, don't fix it. This is how it's gotten. Adam's looking at me. Stuff like that.
I love touches like that. It makes it feel like real and whole.
Not real, but it makes it feel captured. There's no operator in the world who could have operated that shot and made it as perfect as they could have made it in the end. And so why should it be perfect in any iteration? Just because we're doing it in virtual production.
Oh, very good point there. So I'm going to pose this question to the whole group, and a big two-part question, and I'm curious to see if your answers differ based on your different disciplines here. Going into production on this movie, of all the scenes in it, which one did you think was going to be the toughest for you to pull off, and ultimately, was it or did a different scene catch you by surprise?
I'll start. I think for me, coming from the kind of filmmaking backgrounds that Barry and I come from, I was worried about the action sequences, to be honest with you, because it's just not a familiar place for me. And so, jumping into that territory was something that I maybe just had a bit of anxiousness around. But I think I'm probably, really proud of them, honestly, at the end of the day. I think, that while I feel like we captured an exciting energy, I also feel like we kept it really story-based and kept it really character-based. And so that blend of things feels, I'm really proud of them, honestly. The hardest ones that I maybe didn't see coming, I don't know. I'll be honest, none really come to mind. I think that the support by these two gentlemen over here and many others in their teams, I honestly felt like I had such a great sort of team behind the scenes that, I don't know, I felt like I struggled all that much in a sense,
Hands down, the flood sequence. With Mufasa getting tossed around the water, the whole bath. We did months and months and months, if not years of work on that. And that was really, really tricky, just simply by being able to, you've got undulating water that's not going to be real until it's real, like until it's been fully realized, and sort of trying to work our way through the story to get to work out what's actually happening in that chaotic moment. That was really, really tricky to get through. Yeah, it was good too.
I think our Malele dream sequence, the butterflies and the beautiful colors, that song, just, I think, finding everything it needed to be over time, just figuring it out was probably one of the ones that was the trickiest to do. And I would say the other thing was James working on color and working on our look, was also just a long evolution. Not a difficult thing, but just like one of the bigger processes. And, because I thought maybe we'd set it and we'd get it early, but I think we set one thing and we worked on it more and we worked on it more. And 3 years later, we were still working on things. So that was an interesting process, and I'm really happy where we ended up because that was definitely bouncing things around for sure.
For me, I guess I'll go opposite direction. Coming into this, James and I just finished filming the Underground Railroad, and we had kind of evolved a camera.
Thank you. Another
People. We had evolved this camera aesthetic where the camera's kind of omniscient and it's moving through space in relation to what the characters are doing. And I thought it was going to be really difficult to do that. In this film, given the way you make these movies, especially the way we started off making the movie, which is why I said the test scene sucked. But there's a scene where Rafiki's fishing and Mufasa walks up to him at night after waking up from this nightmare. Actually wasn't in the film as of about 8 months ago, but then it came back. But I remember we did all the voices for the movie first, so you record all the actors and Joy cuts all those things together as a radio play. And then when we evolved the quad capture, Dan Fotheringham is in just about every scene in the movie as the physical sort of blocking of the characters. But for that scene, initially Mufasa and Rafiki were facing each other, and James and I, again, we sort of evolved this camera where the characters are moving and the camera's moving, and if the camera doesn't need to cut, it just doesn't cut. And so that was a scene where right away when we played the radio play out loud, I realized that Mufasa wouldn't be able to say the things to Rafiki he was saying to his face, so he needed to move around to the rear of the little fishing hole. And so we started evolving it, and Father sort of drifted around the back, and James was drifting as well. And then there was a moment where we just realized there's going to be some reflection in the water, and James did the tilt down, and it came back up, and it just played. And it was like, oh shit, I'm sorry. oh man. We can just play in this environment the same way we would play on something like the Underground Railroad, and I think that really opened up the process, for me at least, because I didn't know that kind of thing was possible in making a film like this. Otherwise, Fotheringham is absolutely right. The flood was by far the most difficult sequence to capture in this film.
Well, worth all the time that went into it. I have to wind down with you, so I'm going to end with a group question. It's one of my favorite questions to ask, or it has been recently, because I was talking to another director, and it just took a while to emphasize just how happy it made him to see the people working on his movie take such pride in their work and be so enthusiastic about telling that story. So can you each recall the single moment when you felt the most joy as an artist making Mufasa the Lion King?
That's a 4-year process, man. Choose from.
You know it's not the test sequence, though.
It's definitely not a test sequence. No, it is not. It is not.
I have many. I have so many. I had such a good time making this film. But there was one time on stage where I fluffed my cue, and it was right when with the sequence you're talking about, and instead of just holding that moment where I looked down the reflection, or Mufasa looks down the reflection, I just ran around to the other side because Rafik went to grab a fish, and I ran around the other side, and I went, sorry, Barry, as I got on the side, and Barry was laughing. He said, that was amazing, and I just remember just that joy of like that organic iterative approach, especially for an animator. Just feeling that real time feedback was just amazing. It didn't end up in the film, but it was a good moment.
No, it did not, Father. It made you feel good, right? It made you feel good.
I will mention something coming out of the test, actually. There's a shot of Obasi when Mufasa says they'll be coming for us. And Obasi looks around and says, how could you know this? And I think at the end of that test, despite that it's the early days and it's like clunky and rough, and it was difficult with pandemic and everything, you said to us, those eyes, I need that in the rest of the movie.
The purpose for the test was to see if we could push the expressions farther than they had pushed them in the 2019 film. I'm remembering now. And yes, you're right, his eyes.
And I feel like that was one. There's definitely other moments of joy, but that one just popped into my head because I feel like it was like, okay, we're finding something for this guy. He's like, that's the thing I need. And okay, we can give him what he needs. That's like the core thing. Because these guys, these cameras they're in a kind of an orbit, this intimacy you're talking about. Like they're just with the characters, and this was sort of the crossing your fingers. Can we get this right? Is this going to work? So that's just one highlight of many.
I think for me, it was probably the first time I was handed what we call the V-cam, which is this thing that, I'm holding my hands, and on the monitor is the scene and action's called, and I'm walking around an empty sound stage, more or less anyway, with folks around Barry and a number of other people helping to facilitate the program. And as I'm walking through this empty space, and the screen is the movie, and I'm watching lions move, and my movements become the camera's movements. And I think the first time that was handed to me was a lot of joy came out. It was a lot of like, I think we're talking a lot about how sometimes the technology would, maybe it was cumbersome at points and challenging. And while all those things are true, it's a lot of incredible power and creative spirit being handed to me in that moment. And I think when even just that first day that was handed to me, the possibilities start to swirl around in your brain, and you start to realize how you can express yourself with a new tool. I think for me that was actually very joyous. And so while we can complain about the tech sometimes, the tech in this case for me was actually a really positive experience as well.
I've been scratching for an answer while they're answering, and I can't come up with one. It was just too damn long a process. I can't remember. I'm so sorry. It was too doggone long a process. I'm trying to remember not to curse. I'm sorry. That's what I got.
I'll follow up briefly to maybe pull one specific thing, because we haven't taken a single moment to touch on your incredible ensemble here. Is there any particular moment when you were working with one of them when, I don't know, they just like nailed something in a way you never could have imagined at the start?
Yeah, it wasn't about nailing things so much as I'm always trying to, like Jenkins was saying, have these moments, or Adam, have these moments of discovery. And in the movie, we have these outsiders who are these lions with this white pigmentation. Which is actually something that occurs in the wild. They have this genetic mutation, and so they're born with white fur. And we were recording with Dr. Connie, who plays the elder Rafiki and Blue Ivy, the eldest and youngest members of our cast. And he's an older cast. He's got all these stories, and he's like, Barry, I was in a movie with these white lions, and it's so funny because in that movie I was protecting them. I was like, what? He goes, yeah, there's certain parts of Africa where these lions people hunt them because they think they're bad luck and they're evil. And he goes, isn't it funny that in this movie that instead they become these very evil beings? And so we just riffed out this whole thing where Kiara, the youngest person in the movie, who I think young people will see themselves when they go to see the film, where she asked the question, well, who are the outsiders? And they gave Dr. Connie the opportunity to tell this really beautiful story. Like he says, when the people most like you don't love you, is it a hurt that can cause the greatest pain, and this pain can lead you to hate everything. And to me, that really encapsulated what The Lion King is in its best version, where you can have these characters living these lives, and through that, young people and adult people and elder people can have these discussions about why the world has shaped these characters to be the way they are. Because in the one film with Dr. Connie, a character like Heroes is behaving in one way, but in this film, he's behaving in a different way. So I thought it was a really lovely thing.
Beautiful memory right there. We have to wind this down, so I'm going to say yet again, huge congratulations.
Wait, can I say one thing? Wait, pause. Oh my God. So I went to film school at Florida State University. And I didn't think I could make movies. And somehow I had this professor who believed in me, and I made this short film. James shot it. It was the first short I ever made that really made me believe I could be a filmmaker, and I dedicated it to that professor, and she is sitting right there. This is crazy.
These lights are in my eyes. I can see you. I just saw you. Oh my, thank you so much. No Moonlight, no Beale Street, no Underground Road, no Mufasa without this woman. I love you. Thank you so much.